all 50 states have engaged in protests. On top of that, you have protests going on in different countries, UK, obviously Canada here. I forgot they said about like almost over 10 countries have started doing these protests. So it's been going on like, and it's arguably, people are saying it's one of the biggest like civil rights protests we've seen in modern day history, right? And for me, like when people like I understand that looting and destruction of buildings is bad, etc. And like for me, two of these are bad too. But I question if when people look at these protests and the only thing they take out of these protests is like, look, people are looting and destroying buildings. I really question whether people are trying to understand the root cause of these protests. Right? It's like somebody said it perfectly. I forgot who said it, but they're like, yo, look, imagine you went to a hospital and a doctor is just checking for your symptoms and he leaves it as that. That wouldn't make sense to you, because it's like, because you can have an underlying condition that will just keep giving you the same symptoms, but you'll never know because the doctor never looked for the root causes. You never looked at, maybe you have cancer, maybe you have an aneurysm, anything, right? You have to understand the root causes. You can't only look at the symptoms. And a lot has been made about the people have been starting to bring up, okay, look at how Martin Luther King protests, peaceful protesting, etc. And I kind of wanted to get into that because I believe there's like about three things we could learn from the way of Martin Luther King protests. Because starting with the Montgomery bus boycott, what happened in Montgomery with Rosa Parks is that sort of in the Montgomery bus system, there's the first 10 seats are allocated to the white people, the back 10 seats are allocated to black people, and then you have this middle section of about 16 seats. So there's like 36 seats in total, but that middle section of 16 seats, it's the way it works is that as from going from forward to back, it's white, white, and then black, right? So whichever white person starts the row in the middle section, the black people have to go to the back row. We can't be in the same row, right? So what happened with Rosa Parks is that she sat in that middle section, and the white man came in, and he's like, and the law stipulates that Rosa Parks has to stand up and create another black row at the after that, right? But she was like, no, I'm not doing that. So what happens after that is she gets arrested, and the Women's Political Council in Montgomery was like, you know what? On the Monday following Rosa Parks' arrest, because Monday was supposed to be her trial date, they're like, what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the whole community, the black community, to boycott the bus. They're like, everybody boycott the bus. There's different ways you can get around. Maybe take a taxi, maybe take that day off, but boycott the bus in support of Rosa Parks, because that, I believe Rosa Parks was like the third black woman that was arrested in this in the same manner and because of the same situation. So they're like, let's boycott the bus. The protest was very, very successful on that Monday. And then Martin Luther King was like, that same night, was elected the president of the Montgomery Improvement Association. And during that meeting where he was elected president, they discussed, do we keep this bus boycott going on for longer? What should we do? And Martin Luther King advocated, let's keep doing it until they desegregate the buses, because what we spoke about before on this podcast is about, go affect the bottom line. If you want change, you have to affect the bottom line. And I believe black people were three-fourths of the people that would use the bus system. So here we go. Now they're fully engaged into protests, and there you see the black community band together, because you have now this allocate the this very diverse way, this network of let's say black taxi drivers charging African Americans the same rate that they would be paying in the bus. You have also a carpool network being created. The whole community is getting together for this bus boycott. And eventually, 381 days after the boycott starts, they finally desegregate the buses, as the Supreme Court rules it unconstitutional to segregate the buses. And that model is a model that keeps getting used, right? So this is the first thing we learn about affecting the bottom line of these corporations or these institutions that are racist against you and that commit these immoral acts. That's one of the first things we can learn from Martin Luther King, about that. Affect the bottom line. Now, going on further, people talk about the violence, about how he was a non-peaceful protester, and he was. but also you have to understand that strategy was the that strategy from Martin Luther King came because not only is he a God fearing man, but also back in the day, you the way the police showed their true colors, they showed it unprovoked, and we see it even now during the protests, right? So when Martin Luther King originally he went to Albany because he wanted to desegregate the city, and he organized kneel-ins and sit-ins and etc. But the Albany police chief was like, I'm not falling for these non-peaceful protests, because she learned that, okay, if I attack him while he's doing peaceful protests, then it's just gonna galvanize the whole movement. I'm not doing that. So what they would do is they would just do mass arrests, no violence, no nothing. They would let it go. They would just let it happen. And ultimately, the Albany campaign in 1961 was a complete fail. Like, nothing ended up happening in Albany, right? But Martin Luther King was like, all right, we know for a fact the way the police treats black people. We know that they brutalize us and etc. And what he did is he went to Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham, Alabama was home to one of the biggest racists you could ever know back at the time, which is Eugene Bull Connor, right? He was the public safety chief in Birmingham, Alabama. And Martin Luther King did the same thing he did in Albany, but this time in Birmingham, the police and the whole institution just showed their true colors. He did the same thing, sit-ins, kneel-ins, and that's when they were hosing down protesters. They were using dogs to attack protesters, and these images till this day, are in all history books, and they're all seen as the catalyst and the amount of and the movement that really propelled the Civil Rights Acts, which comes afterwards in 1964.
When you talk about community relationship, when you talk about police community relationships with the black community, you also have to keep in mind that the police historically had, were the ones who were responsible for oppressing the black community. For instance, if you look at segregation, who was responsible for enforcing segregation? The police. Jim Crow laws. Who was responsible for enforcing Jim Crow laws? The police. You know, so like, from a historical standpoint, the police has always been on the other side when it comes to black people and the freedom. So this also has created, like, this also, like, reinforces the narrative that, oh, the police is against us. We cannot ally with the police. Because all throughout history, if you look at the history of the police, as I explained earlier, till now, the police has always been on the side against black people. And unless that the police is going to come out somehow, some way, and be for the black community, like tangible acts to see the way black people could see, okay, yeah, well, now the police has changed or whatever, community police relationships will not change. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is this. When it comes to Martin Luther King, there's so much hypocrisy. Like, when people use, oh, Martin Luther King was non-violent, blah, 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 they still killed him. The man was not violent, he was still killed, first of all. Second of all, at the time when Martin Luther King was walking, most white people in America did not support what he was doing. I believe the polls around that time showed that 60% of white America did not support Martin Luther King. They did not like him. They sent dogs after him, wolves. They beat him up. They arrested him multiple times.
They bombed his house.
So now all of a sudden, yeah, they bombed his house. They did all sorts of things. So all of a sudden, now today, you're talking about, oh, Martin Luther King, this and that. When back in the time, not only did you not support him, but if you look at the change that Martin Luther King generated, when the desegregation of the schools, whatever. Well, you know what white people did when, the government, signed the desegregation of the schools? You know what they did? Why did the government force themselves to bus black kids into white schools? You know why? Because the white parents, the same white parents of the people out there protesting, once upon a time, they were the ones going into these buses, beating up black kids, bombing these buses, killing some of these black kids. So this idea that, oh, Martin Luther King was all this peaceful, whatever, why can't we not be like Martin Luther King? Well, you guys hated Martin Luther King. Even up until today, you have people protesting for why Martin Luther King Day is a national holiday. So there is so much hypocrisy when it comes to, people comparing, today's movement to Martin Luther King. It's like, well, he did it peacefully, you killed him. So what else do we have to resort to? And also when it comes to the protests, First of all, when it comes to the violence, I have three things. When they burnt down that police station and they burnt down police vehicle, I condone that behavior. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because those are the exact institutions that have been out there historically that has oppressed the black community. So I do not condone the burning down of the police station or the burning down of police vehicles first. Second of all, when you talk about cooperation, when they burn down like Targets or Walmart, to be honest, I don't give a damn. And let me explain you why I don't give a damn. Well, first of all, these corporations that they make billions and billions and billions of dollars, alright? They will rebuild them. So it's not only an issue. Second of all, when you look at the Corona funds, when the government released about $2 trillion in Corona relief for everyone, well, who got most of the money? These same corporations at the burning. Target, Walmart, Amazon, etc., etc. So this idea that, oh, well, they're burning down Target is a bad thing, whatever, whatever. No, it's not a bad thing. Jeff Bezos is about to be a trillionaire. You look at like the heads of Walmart, the heads of IKEA and all that, they're billionaires. So they will rebuild it back. So I don't really give a damn. But third, when it comes to burning down local businesses and all that, now this is where I am more sympathetic to the fact, this is where I condemn the action, because, you know, burning down local businesses, not only is it not going to change anything, but some of these people are the same people in the community providing essential services. So this is where I condone that behavior. But also, what we must keep in mind is this protest is not only filled with people that support the movement. You got agent provocateurs in this protest. You got undercover police. You got white supremacists. You have anarchist groups who have all tried to hijack this protest to push their cause. Like, for instance, white supremacists, agent provocateurs, and undercover police are out there purposely burning down buildings, purposely creating riots. You've probably seen this where they're going around giving out bricks to people or putting bricks in place where there's no construction. So their goal is to try to diminish the movement so that people have this idea that, oh, these Black Lives Matters protesters are dangerous, thugs, whatever, whatever. So the plan is to destroy the movement by the inside. You also have anarchist groups who want to come out there, hijack every issues for whatever causes there are. So when we talk about the violence of the protest, to be honest, most of the people doing that violence are not people who support the protest. They're not even there they don't, you know, I remember one time I was watching a video, one of the police officers said, well, we arrested some guy that did like the burning, and we asked him, what are you protesting for? The man does not even know who George Floyd is. He does not even know who George Floyd is, but he's out there. So we have to keep in mind that a lot of this chaos that was created by the quote-unquote protesters are actually people who are sent there to create chaos in order to diminish the movement.
You know, there's been some misinformation about the what's happening with the violent protests, or just like lack of clarity of what exactly is happening. You know, so you know, like I guess the way I prefer things is just to, you know, wait a little bit and wait for some time to find out exactly what's happening with these riots, you know. But that doesn't mean that I don't condemn these riots. I think that is a reasonable position, and but also that doesn't mean that one must not contextualize the situation, you know. These riots are happening in a country that's going through three major crises, I must add, you know, a public health crisis, an economic crisis, and a social crisis, you know. And furthermore, the existent institutional racism in the United States exacerbates these crises for many African Americans, you know. And just to be a bit more concrete about what I mean, so if you look at the coronavirus, the COVID-19, you can see that it's affecting African Americans disproportionately, you know, compared to white Americans. So in Milwaukee County, for example, African Americans account for 27% of the population and account for over half of all the COVID-19 cases. In Illinois, African Americans account for 15% of the population, but 33% of the COVID-19 cases. and 40% of the COVID-19 deaths. In Georgia, for example, African Americans account for 37% of the population and 62% of the COVID-19 deaths. And also, like starkest of all these example is the city of St. Louis, which African Americans account for 47% of the population and almost three quarters, so 75% of all the COVID-19 cases um, are African Americans, and pretty much everyone who has died from the virus is black, you know. So, and there's also studies on the national level indicated that African Americans are three times more likely to die from the coronavirus than white folks, you know. So, but this is not to say that the virus itself is racist, but there exist these disparities in the system regarding healthcare, you know, regarding income, regarding how people eat, regarding, you know, all these things that amount to the results we're seeing. So on the second crisis that I mentioned, you know, the economic crisis in the US, I think there's like 40, well, there was at least 40 million people who were unemployed because of the coronavirus. And although um, this morning, we're June 5th, there was a jobs report that came out, and I saw President Trump did a press conference, you know, talking about how the numbers are looking better, because I think there's like 2 million or 3 million new jobs were added
Yeah, 2.5. Yeah.
in the month of May. 2.5, you know. But so if you so the numbers are, the unemployment numbers dropped in May for white Americans from 14.2% to 12.4%, but for African Americans it stands at 16. It was at 16. Right now it's at 16.8%, whereas in April it was at 16.7%. So if you look at the, you know, before, you know, like, I think it's helpful to contextualize the moment in which we're living in before, you know, like, as you're looking at what's happening in the streets. Obviously burning out small businesses, even bigger businesses, I believe is wrong, and is,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, is not helpful to the cause. Although, you know,
It's not.
there's more attention, as you said, Jermaine, that is now on the cause because of these acts. But I believe at the end of the day, this is not helpful, because all you see is that there are people who not only don't want to align with the cause and are using the violence as an excuse not to not align with the cause, you know. So that's why I don't believe this violence is necessary.